Introduction: The Dragon's Unfolding Story. From the dawn of civilization, China has been a land of paradoxes, a civilization that has soared to unimaginable heights of power and prosperity, only to plummet into centuries of humiliation and poverty. Its journey from a great empire of antiquity to a seemingly poor village in the eyes of the world, then to a nation that defied expectations by escaping the fate of the Soviet Union, and finally, to an economic powerhouse that challenges global superpowers. This is a narrative of resilience, ambition, and ruthless pragmatism. This video series will unravel the epic saga of China, exploring its glorious past, its period of profound weakness, its communist transformation, and its unprecedented rise to global prominence, ultimately asking, how did a nation once brought to its knees not just catch up, but surpass its former oppressors, only to face the very challenges of the first world it sought to conquer? The Great Empire of Asia. For millennia, China stood as the undisputed hegemon of Asia, a civilization so advanced, so sophisticated, and so immense that it genuinely saw itself as the Middle Kingdom, the literal center of the world. This wasn't merely arrogance, it was a reflection of a tangible reality. While Europe was still emerging from the Dark Ages, China was forging empires, developing groundbreaking technologies, and cultivating a culture of unparalleled depth and complexity. The cradle of civilization. China's history stretches back over 5,000 years, marked by a succession of powerful dynasties that unified vast territories and established a centralized imperial system. The Yellow River and Yangtze River basins provided fertile ground for agriculture, leading to surplus food production and the rapid growth of population centers. Early dynasties like the Xia, though debated, Shang, and Zhou laid the foundational stones of Chinese governance, philosophy, and societal structure. The concept of the mandate of heaven emerged during the Zhou dynasty, providing a divine justification for imperial rule and setting the precedent for dynastic cycles of rise, prosperity, decline, and overthrow. This ideology was not merely religious, it was a powerful political tool that ensured stability for centuries, as long as rulers were perceived as just and effective. Technological marvels. Ancient and imperial China was a hotbed of innovation. Many inventions that revolutionized the world originated here. The four great inventions, papermaking, printing, gunpowder, and the compass, alone transformed global communication, warfare, and navigation. Papermaking, perfected during the Han Dynasty, 206 BCE, 220 CE, made writing materials abundant and affordable, facilitating the spread of knowledge and bureaucratic administration. Printing, initially woodblock printing during the Tang Dynasty, 618 to 907 CE, and later movable type during the Song Dynasty, 960 to 1279 CE. Democratized access to texts, contributing to literacy and intellectual flourishing. Gunpowder, discovered by Taoist alchemists in the 9th century, fundamentally changed warfare, leading to the development of firearms and cannons. The compass, used for navigation from at least the Song Dynasty, enabled long-distance maritime exploration and trade, foreshadowing China's potential as a naval power. Beyond these four, Chinese innovations included porcelain, a highly sophisticated ceramic. China's porcelain was coveted worldwide, driving extensive trade along the Silk Road and maritime routes. Silk production, the secret of silk, fiercely guarded for centuries, created an immensely valuable commodity that gave the Silk Road its name and propelled China's economic might. Iron and steel metallurgy, advanced blast furnaces and steel production techniques predated similar developments in Europe by centuries, providing stronger tools and weapons. Seismographs, hydraulic engineering, intricate clockwork mechanisms, and superior shipbuilding techniques, like the junk, with its watertight compartments and rudder, further demonstrated China's technological prowess. Sophisticated governance and culture. China's imperial system was arguably the most sophisticated and enduring political structure in world history. The Confucian philosophy, emphasizing social harmony, respect for hierarchy, education, and ethical governance, became the bedrock of state administration. The imperial examination system, formalized during the Sui and Tang dynasties, allowed individuals to rise in government based on merit rather than birthright. This system, though imperfect, fostered a highly educated bureaucracy that was remarkably stable and effective for over a millennium. Scholars, poets, artists, and philosophers flourished under this system, producing masterpieces in calligraphy, landscape painting, poetry, e.g., Tang poetry, and historical writing. The construction of the Great Wall of China, the Grand Canal, and magnificent imperial palaces further showcased their organizational capability and engineering might. Trade, facilitated by the Silk Road and maritime networks, brought immense wealth and cultural exchange, solidifying China's position as a global economic and cultural hub. The Ming dynasty's treasure voyages led by Admiral Zheng He in the early 15th century, deploying massive fleets across the Indian Ocean and to the coast of Africa, stand as a testament to China's maritime power, far exceeding anything Europe was capable of at the time. These expeditions, however, were controversially halted, a decision that would later be viewed as a missed opportunity in global exploration and dominance. A self-sufficient world order. Crucially, China maintained a tributary system with neighboring states, where smaller nations offered tribute in exchange for trade benefits and recognition of their rulers. This was not merely about economic gain, it was a cultural and political assertion of China's preeminence, reinforcing its self-perception as the benevolent, superior power at the center of the world. Foreign goods and ideas were either integrated or dismissed, but always on China's terms. This deep-seated belief in its own superiority and self-sufficiency, while a source of strength for centuries, would ironically become a significant vulnerability when it eventually encountered aggressively expanding Western powers with entirely different notions of trade, diplomacy, and global order. This era of undisputed grandeur created a deeply ingrained cultural memory of China as a dominant force, a memory that would fuel its later aspirations for rejuvenation. A century of humiliation. The perception of China as the Middle Kingdom, self-sufficient, superior, and invulnerable, began to shatter in the mid-19th century. This period, known as the Century of Humiliation, roughly from 1839 to 1949, saw China, once the world's preeminent power, reduced to a semi-colonial state, plundered and humiliated by Western imperialists and an ascendant Japan. It was a brutal awakening that left an indelible scar on the Chinese psyche and ignited a fierce desire for national rejuvenation. The Opium Wars, 1839 to 1842 and 1856 to 1860, the cracks begin. The catalyst for this decline was Britain's insatiable demand for Chinese goods like tea and silk. To balance the trade deficit, the British East India Company began illegally smuggling vast quantities of opium from India into China. When the Qing government attempted to suppress this trade, Britain, citing free trade principles and protecting its merchants, launched the First Opium War. The technologically superior British Navy easily defeated China's outdated forces. The resulting Treaty of Nanjing, 1842, was the first of many unequal treaties, forcing China to cede Hong Kong to Britain, open 5 treaty ports to foreign trade, pay a massive indemnity, grant extraterritoriality to British subjects, meaning they were exempt from Chinese law. The Second Opium War, or Arrow War, further deepened China's humiliation, leading to the sacking of the old summer palace, Yuanmingyuan, and more concessions, including opening more ports, legalizing the opium trade, and allowing foreign powers to establish diplomatic legations in Beijing. These wars exposed the Qing dynasty's military weakness and the vulnerability of its once mighty empire. Internal rebellions and dynastic decay. Compounding the external pressures were devastating internal rebellions that further weakened the Qing state. The Taiping Rebellion, 1850–1864. Led by Hong Xiuquan, who claimed to be the younger brother of Jesus Christ, was one of the bloodiest conflicts in human history, resulting in an estimated 20 to 30 million deaths. It severely destabilized the empire, ravaged vast agricultural lands, and consumed enormous resources. Other uprisings, such as the Nian Rebellion and Muslim rebellions, underscored the widespread discontent and the government's inability to effectively control its vast territory. The Qing dynasty, already facing corruption and administrative inefficiency, proved incapable of modernizing quickly enough to counter these multifaceted threats. The scramble for concessions. Following the Opium Wars, other Western powers, France, Russia, Germany, the United States, and later Japan, demanded similar privileges, carving China into spheres of influence. These weren't direct colonies but areas where foreign powers held exclusive economic and political rights, building railways, extracting resources, and establishing their own military bases. China was forced to lease territories, grant mining rights, and allow foreign banks to operate with impunity. The Boxer Rebellion, 1899–1901, an anti-foreign and anti-Christian uprising, was brutally suppressed by an 8-nation alliance, including Western powers and Japan, leading to even heavier indemnities and further erosion of Chinese sovereignty. The image of Western and Japanese soldiers marching through Beijing was a profound symbolic defeat. The rise of Japan and the Sino-Japanese Wars. Perhaps the most painful humiliation came from a former tributary state, Japan. After its rapid modernization during the Meiji Restoration, Japan quickly became an imperial power. The First Sino-Japanese War, 1894–1895, saw Japan decisively defeat China, forcing it to cede Taiwan and the Pescadores Islands, recognize Korea's independence, which Japan would later annex, and pay a massive indemnity. This loss shattered China's regional dominance and revealed the stark difference in modernization efforts. The Second Sino-Japanese War, 1937–1945, part of World War II, was even more brutal. Japan launched a full-scale invasion, leading to atrocities like the Nanjing Massacre. This war devastated China, killed tens of millions, and left vast swathes of its territory under foreign occupation. It also severely weakened the nascent Republic of China government, creating fertile ground for the rise of the Communist Party. The fall of the Qing dynasty and the Republic. The repeated defeats, internal turmoil, and foreign exploitation finally led to the collapse of the Qing dynasty in 1911, ending over 2,000 years of imperial rule. The establishment of the Republic of China, led first by Sun Yat-sen and later by Chiang Kai-shek's Kuomintang (KMT) party, brought hope for national resurgence. However, the Republic struggled with warlordism, internal divisions, and continued foreign aggression. The KMT's efforts to unify China and resist foreign powers were hampered by its own corruption and the growing threat of the Chinese Communist Party. The century of humiliation was a period of immense suffering, loss of sovereignty, and profound psychological damage that would shape China's national identity and its leaders' determination to never again be weak. The Great Dictator. The century of humiliation culminated in a brutal civil war between the nationalist Kuomintang (KMT) and the Chinese Communist Party (CCP). Against all odds, the CCP, led by Mao Zedong, emerged victorious in 1949, proclaiming the People's Republic of China. Mao, a figure of immense charisma and ruthless determination, would dominate China for nearly 3 decades, fundamentally reshaping every aspect of Chinese society through radical ideology, mass mobilization, and often, catastrophic policies. He was the Great Dictator, who promised to restore China's dignity but inflicted unprecedented suffering on his own people. The birth of the People's Republic and land reform. Mao's victory in 1949 was seen by many as the ultimate reclamation of Chinese sovereignty after a century of foreign oppression. The CCP promised to liberate the vast peasant population from landlords and empower the working class. One of Mao's first major initiatives was land reform, a brutal but effective policy that redistributed land from wealthy landlords to poor peasants. This process involved public trials, denunciations, and often the execution of landlords, cementing the CCP's control over the rural population and eliminating the traditional landowning class. While it brought a sense of justice and empowerment to many peasants, it also established a pattern of political violence and centralized control that would define Mao's rule. The cult of personality and ideological control. Mao rapidly consolidated power, establishing a highly centralized one-party state. He cultivated a pervasive cult of personality, positioning himself as the infallible leader, the great helmsman, whose thoughts and directives were absolute truth. His ideology, Mao Zedong thought, Maoism, became the guiding principle for everything, from politics and economics to culture and social life. The state controlled all media, education, and public discourse. Dissent was ruthlessly suppressed, and political campaigns became a constant feature of life, ensuring ideological conformity and purging anyone deemed disloyal or counter-revolutionary. The Great Leap Forward, 1958 to 1962 catastrophe by design. Mao's ambition to rapidly transform China into an industrial and agricultural superpower led to the Great Leap Forward. This was a radical economic and social campaign aimed at collectivizing agriculture and industrializing rural areas through backyard furnaces to produce steel. Mao believed that sheer human will and mass mobilization could overcome economic laws. The results were catastrophic. Agricultural disaster, peasants were forced into communes, traditional farming practices were abandoned for unproven theories, e.g., deep plowing, close planting, and massive amounts of labor were diverted to industrial projects. Official reports exaggerated harvests, leading the state to take more grain than available, resulting in widespread famine. Industrial failure. The steel produced in backyard furnaces was largely useless, diverting resources and labor from other essential industries. Massive famine. The combination of misguided policies, local officials exaggerating production to meet quotas, and a lack of accurate information led to the Great Chinese Famine, one of the deadliest man-made disasters in history, resulting in an estimated 30 to 45 million deaths. Mao's disastrous leadership and unwillingness to admit mistakes exacerbated the crisis. The Cultural Revolution, 1966 to 1976. Chaos and destruction. Despite the failure of the Great Leap, Mao retained ultimate power. Fearing that the Communist Party was becoming too bureaucratic and that traditional culture was reasserting itself, and seeking to reassert his absolute authority, Mao launched the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution. This was a violent, chaotic socio-political purge that lasted for a decade. Mobilization of youth. Mao encouraged young people, organized into Red Guards, to attack four olds, old customs, old culture, old habits, old ideas, and root out capitalist roaders and counter-revolutionaries within the party, government, and society. Destruction of heritage. Temples, historical artifacts, libraries, and ancient texts were destroyed. Intellectuals, artists, teachers, and anyone associated with traditional or Western culture were persecuted, publicly humiliated, tortured, and often killed. Internal purges. The Cultural Revolution devolved into factional violence, with different Red Guard groups fighting each other, and military intervention becoming necessary. Many top party officials, including Liu Shaoqi and Deng Xiaoping, who would later lead China, were purged. The Cultural Revolution effectively shut down China's education system and plunged the country into anarchy. It caused immense suffering, generational trauma, and severely damaged China's intellectual and cultural heritage. Mao's legacy, liberator and destroyer. Mao Zedong's legacy is profoundly complex and fiercely debated. He is revered by the CCP as the founding father who liberated China from foreign domination and unified the nation after a century of humiliation. He established the People's Republic, granting China newfound dignity on the international stage. However, his methods and policies, particularly the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution, led to the deaths of tens of millions of Chinese people and inflicted deep wounds that took decades to heal. He transformed China from a poor village in the eyes of the world into a formidable, if internally shattered, communist state, paving the way for future transformations, but at an almost unimaginable human cost. His rule left China isolated, economically backward, and scarred by political extremism, setting the stage for the dramatic changes that would follow his death. The architect of China. Mao Zedong's death in 1976 left China in a state of political paralysis, economic stagnation, and social exhaustion. The Cultural Revolution had shattered institutions, persecuted intellectuals, and left the country deeply impoverished. It was a seemingly insurmountable challenge, one that many Western observers believed would lead to the collapse of the Communist Party and perhaps even the fragmentation of China, much like the Soviet Union. Yet, China not only held together but embarked on an unprecedented trajectory of economic growth. This remarkable transformation was largely engineered by one man, Deng Xiaoping, the architect of modern China, whose pragmatic reforms pulled China back from the brink. Deng's rise to power and pragmatism. Deng Xiaoping was a veteran revolutionary who had been twice purged during the Cultural Revolution for being a capitalist roader. He understood firsthand the devastating consequences of Mao's ideological extremism. After Mao's death, a power struggle ensued, from which Deng, through shrewd political maneuvering, gradually emerged as the paramount leader by 1978. Deng's philosophy was encapsulated in his famous dictum, "It doesn't matter whether a cat is black or white, as long as it catches mice." This pragmatic approach signaled a radical departure from Mao's ideological rigidity. He recognized that China's priority had to be economic development, even if it meant deviating from strict communist dogma. Reform and opening up. Deng launched the ambitious policy of reform and opening up in 1978, a comprehensive program designed to modernize China's economy and integrate it into the global system. This was a gradual, experimental process, often described as crossing the river by feeling the stones. Agricultural reforms. The first major reform was the household responsibility system in agriculture. Land, though still state-owned, was leased to individual households, who could farm it, keep the surplus produce after meeting state quotas, and sell it on the open market. This immediately boosted agricultural output, improved living standards for peasants, and ended the threat of famine. Special Economic Zones, SEZs, to attract foreign investment and technology. Deng established special economic zones in coastal cities, e.g., Shenzhen, Zhuhai, Xiamen. These zones offered preferential policies, tax breaks, and looser regulations, creating a more market-friendly environment. SEZs became engines of export-led growth, transforming fishing villages into bustling industrial hubs. Decentralization and market mechanisms. The central planning system was gradually decentralized. State-owned enterprises, SOEs, were given more autonomy, and private businesses were cautiously allowed to emerge. Price controls were relaxed, allowing market forces to play a greater role. Opening to the world. China actively sought foreign trade, investment, and technology. It joined international organizations, sent students abroad, and welcomed foreign companies, eager to learn from advanced economies. Why China didn't collapse like the Soviet Union? This is a critical question. Several factors differentiate China's path from the USSR's eventual collapse. Economic sequencing. Deng prioritized economic reform before political liberalization. The CCP maintained firm political control while unleashing market forces. In contrast, Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev's glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring, introduced political reforms simultaneously with economic ones, leading to a loss of control and eventual disintegration. Peasant base versus urban proletariat. China was, and still largely is, at the time of reforms, an agrarian society with a vast peasant population. Land reform immediately benefited hundreds of millions of people, giving them a tangible stake in the reforms and building popular support for the CCP. The Soviet system, focused on heavy industry and an urban proletariat, did not have such a broad, immediately successful economic reform to offer its populace. Cultural factors: China's long history of centralized imperial rule and a strong sense of national unity, despite internal strife, provided a deeper cultural foundation for maintaining state integrity compared to the multi-ethnic Soviet Union, where various republics harbored long-standing nationalist aspirations. Incrementalism and experimentation: Deng's crossing the river by feeling the stones approach allowed for flexibility, learning from mistakes, and adapting reforms gradually. There was no single grand plan but rather a series of experiments. The Soviet Union's reforms often felt more top-down and less adaptable. Avoiding political liberalization. The CCP ruthlessly suppressed any significant demands for political liberalization, most notably during the Tiananmen Square protests in 1989. This demonstrated the party's unwavering commitment to maintaining its monopoly on power, ensuring stability, albeit through authoritarian means, necessary for economic reforms to take root. This stark contrast with the USSR's eventual political opening was a decisive factor in the CCP's survival. Deng's enduring legacy. Deng Xiaoping steered China from the brink of disaster, unleashing its economic potential and setting it on a path of rapid modernization. He moved China from a centrally planned, isolated economy to a socialist market economy that combined state control with market mechanisms. While he never held the top official titles, his authority was supreme. He initiated a peaceful transfer of power, setting a precedent for collective leadership, though this has evolved since. However, Deng's legacy is also marked by the brutal suppression of dissent and the creation of a system where economic prosperity came at the cost of political freedom. He was the architect who rebuilt China's house, making it strong and prosperous, but firmly reinforced the walls of the Communist Party around it. His reforms laid the groundwork for China to not just catch up, but eventually challenge the very global powers that once humiliated it. Steal like an artist, and then innovate. Deng Xiaoping's reforms set China on a path of unprecedented economic growth, transforming it from a poor village into the world's second-largest economy. But how did China achieve this incredible feat, not just catching up, but in many areas, surpassing the very nations that once held technological and economic dominance? The answer lies in a multifaceted strategy that combined aggressive technology transfer, massive investment in infrastructure and education, strategic state intervention, and eventually, a powerful drive towards indigenous innovation, often summarized by the phrase, "steal like an artist," meaning to learn, adapt, and then create something new and better. The initial strategy: catch up through technology transfer. In the early stages of reform and opening up, China's primary goal was to acquire Western technology and management expertise. This was not a passive process, it was a deliberate and often aggressive strategy. Foreign direct investment, FDI. China aggressively courted foreign companies, offering access to its massive market in exchange for setting up joint ventures. Crucially, these joint ventures often required foreign companies to transfer technology and know-how to their Chinese partners. This was a mandated learning process. Reverse engineering and copying. Chinese companies, often with tacit or explicit state support, engaged in extensive reverse engineering and outright copying of foreign products and technologies. While often criticized as intellectual property theft, it was a rapid and effective way to bridge the technological gap, especially in consumer electronics, automotive, and manufacturing. Sending students abroad, China sent hundreds of thousands of its brightest students to Western universities to study science, engineering, and business. Many returned, bringing back invaluable knowledge, skills, and networks, which they then applied to China's developing industries. Industrial espionage. Western intelligence agencies and companies have consistently reported widespread state-sponsored industrial espionage aimed at acquiring sensitive technologies, designs, and business secrets. This provided shortcuts to innovation that would otherwise take decades and billions in R&D. Massive investment in infrastructure and education. While technology transfer was crucial, China also made strategic investments that created the foundation for its growth. Infrastructure blitz. China invested heavily in world-class infrastructure, high-speed rail networks, modern ports, vast highway systems, and advanced telecommunication networks. This dramatically reduced logistics costs, facilitated trade, and connected its vast domestic market, enabling rapid industrialization. Human capital development. Post-Cultural Revolution, China made a concerted effort to rebuild its education system, investing heavily in universities and vocational training. This created a vast pool of skilled labor, engineers, and scientists necessary to absorb, adapt, and eventually innovate new technologies. The "Made in China" to "Innovated in China" shift. Initially, China was the world's factory, known for cheap manufacturing and often poor quality. However, as it absorbed foreign technology and accumulated wealth, a strategic shift occurred. Indigenous innovation drive. The Chinese government launched ambitious plans like Made in China 2025, though the name has since been de-emphasized due to international pressure, to move up the value chain, reduce reliance on foreign technology, and become a global leader in high-tech industries. Massive state subsidies and R&D funding were poured into strategic sectors like AI, quantum computing, biotechnology, new energy vehicles, and semiconductors. Fostering a domestic market. China's enormous domestic market became a crucial testing ground and launchpad for its own technology companies. Companies like Huawei, Tencent, Alibaba, and ByteDance, TikTok's parent company, grew rapidly by catering to Chinese consumers first, allowing them to scale quickly before expanding globally. The power of scale and speed. China's centralized political system allowed for rapid decision-making and deployment of resources on a scale unmatched by democracies. This enabled ambitious projects to be completed at speeds that astounded the world. Challenges of a first-world power. Today, China has largely achieved its goal of catching up and, in many areas, surpassing its rivals. It boasts the world's largest high-speed rail network, leads in 5G technology, dominates renewable energy production, and is a major player in AI. However, this success has brought its own set of first-world problems. Environmental degradation. Decades of rapid, unregulated industrialization have led to severe air and water pollution, soil contamination, and resource depletion, posing significant public health and environmental challenges. Aging population. The legacy of the one-child policy has resulted in a rapidly aging population and a shrinking workforce, putting immense pressure on social welfare systems and future economic growth. Income inequality. While overall prosperity has soared, the wealth gap between urban and rural areas, and between the rich and poor, has widened considerably, leading to social tensions. Technological competition and trade wars. China's rise has ignited intense technological and trade competition with the West, particularly the United States. This has led to trade wars, sanctions, and a drive by Western nations to de-risk their supply chains from China. Geopolitical tensions. China's assertive foreign policy and growing military power have led to increased tensions in the South China Sea, with Taiwan, and in its relations with neighbors, creating a complex geopolitical landscape. Pressure for political reform. Despite economic liberalization, the Communist Party maintains strict political control, leading to ongoing human rights concerns, particularly regarding ethnic minorities and political dissidents. From the ashes of humiliation, China has risen, demonstrating an unparalleled capacity for transformation. Its journey is a testament to the power of a clear vision, strategic planning, and a national resolve to never again be weak. Yet, as it stands on the global stage as a first-tier power, it now faces the complex task of balancing economic growth with social equity, environmental sustainability, and a volatile global political order, a new set of challenges for the ancient dragon.